Welcome to week 102. Um, Takes too long to count that far. So what did I decide to do today? I could do another 18 by 24. It's generally the size I use. Sometimes we go up a little scale. I never try and go smaller. It's on stretched canvas. I actually toned it, probably a little too red, but a little darker than I usually tone it. And it's kind of I think I put like a burnt sienna, kind of a little bit of blue and white, maybe ochre in there, and kind of scrubbed it on so I have a nice tone. Like I said, it's a little darker than I usually am working. You notice I put a dot right in the middle. Sometimes I do that even when I'm working on location because I kind of figure out where the middle of my composition is, what I'm looking at. In this case, this is kind of a dappled cottage. And one of the reasons I picked it is it's one of the few times that you can really do fun stuff when light is coming from your back. All right, a lot of times it just flattens things out. But if you have elements behind you that throw long cast shadows, these are morning shadows, by the way, that you can utilize that light and really get some interesting things. Now, some of the stuff that's going on is the shadows are a little dense for my taste. So I think I will probably lighten them up a little bit. This is one of the things that I talk about when you start your painting. What is your intent? What do you want to do? That's what I want to do. So we're gonna start basically with a roof line, which is pretty much a straight horizontal, which I kind of like. And it's just we leave a little bit of sky. I really like that part. We also have a little bit of that roof line, but it's going right to the corner. I think I'm going to bring it over just a touch. I never like things going directly to the corner. I usually tell students don't do that, and so I try and practice what I preach pretty much. So this is going to come pretty much kind of in this direction. And then how much space do we see from here to the peak of that roof? And where is the peak of that roof? It falls almost in the center. It's going to fall right about in here. And so it's going to go pretty much that direction. And we want to kind of equalize it. So we don't want to change directions. We want them the same on both sides. And then it's going to go, we're looking up at it a little bit. So we're getting a little bit of a downward perspective. All right. Now, I think I've probably made this a little closer than I need to, which isn't really going to hurt the overall composition. From this, we're going to bring this dark down. This comes down just about past the middle, right about here. That's about right. And then we get that kind of the doorway, the dark. There's an arch of brickwork, and then there's an arch of the open door. It's a really kind of classy looking little cottage. It's a cottage that I would pass by on a run that I would do. And one morning I actually stopped. I had my cell phone with me and stopped and couldn't resist this lighting. So we're just kind of architecturally getting most of these elements in. I liked it because there's color, there's dappled light, there's mechanical shapes, meaning architectural shapes, and then there are a lot of organic shapes. So we get the real nice mix of all that stuff going on, which is, I mean, I love that when I can get it all in there. Now you want to make sure you separate the plants from the shadows. One of the problems with photography in general, unless you're a professional photographer and you shoot with a wide open shutter and you have it on a tripod and shoot, then you can get really accurate. But when you're shooting kind of almost snapshots from the hip, you really are just going to get the density is going to be amplified way more than you really want it. The density meaning the darkness. Now, this point happens at about a quarter. If that's the middle, that's about a quarter. So that's going to mean that this little plant, if I'm going to keep it where it's at, is going to come. I think I'm going to move it a little bit to the right because I think it'll help. And then it's going to go up, over, get some interesting color, beautiful colors. Middle of it, almost right in the center, right about there. There's a lot kind of massive, beautiful fuchsia kind of flowers. Actually, they're a little bit more red here. We get there's a little path. You almost can't see it because it's being obscured by a lot of the ground plane shadows. And then we're going to get this whole big area in here. Now, where does it start? About here. And the flower bed looks like it goes up and it goes back. And then at about this point, it goes up again. So it's going to change that. Move it to about here. Change it up. And then it goes over right about here. And eventually comes that point. All right. So if that's approximately correct, then we're going to get this movement from here up, over about at the midpoint of this, over, little piece of flowers up, and then they're going to kind of work their way down to about here. And then this is foliage. This is a nice big piece of greenery that's very texturized because of the leaves. There's a little tree back in here. I do want to put that in because I don't want a flat plane there. So we've got our basic breakup of shape. The shadows I can indicate, or I can just put them in later. They're going to go somewhere in here. This main shadow is going to break somewhere like this. Let's see if I can get it just kind of sketched in. And then down in here is going to be all, I call it abstract shadow. All right. So what do we spend? We spent about 6 minutes on that. Start with the sky. Let's do some quick analyzation, okay? Lightest part of the roof. Not quite as light here, but pretty light. All right. Roof, a little bit lighter than the sky. Definitely warmer. So keep that in mind. You're always, and I mean this emphatically, you're always comparing the values to an adjacent area. You're not just, I'm not comparing the sky to the lawn at this point. Lawn to me looks a little bit lighter, but it's a much harder evaluation to make. So we're gonna get that sky in there. I want it a little darker. Throw a little bit of Naples into it just to warm it up. I could throw some ochre, but there we go. That looks pretty. Oh, it has to be dark enough so I can show that roof off. And back behind the tree, it's not this kind of, the paint's kind of dry at this point, which is my preference. If it's wet, it's going to be thin and wet, but it's pretty dry. So there's approximately where the roof goes. Let's not worry about the tree. Let's worry about the roof next. Okay. Now I have two basic light values. This is much lighter because this is getting a lot of filtered light in here. So, but we're not going to worry about the shadow. All right. But I don't want to paint thick on that roof right now because I'm going to paint the shadow into it. So I'm going to start with ochre, which is probably generally what I do is I look at the base color and I say, what color on my palette is closer to that base color than any other color? And in this case, I would choose ochre. You might choose a warm brown, but you know, it doesn't matter because you have to augment it anyway. So I started with an ochre. I'm going to add just a hint of an asphaltum into it, or burnt umber if you don't have asphaltum. I'm going to test it right here. It's a little, I want more white in it. And I'm going to put just a little bit of terp. All right. That looks pretty good. So we're going to go straight across. Well, 3, 4 strokes. Geez, I hate to make that many. I just kept missing me. All right. We're kind of rubbing it on. I don't want it thick, although we're not getting, I can actually bring a little more warmth to that over there if I want to. So I just let my brush barely, the tip of my brush barely pick up some cat orange hue. And it didn't pick up enough. Did it again. Feels a little better, feels a little warmer. Not that you have to be right on the money. Like I've said so many times, value is so much more important than the color. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. And we're going to bring it over to about here and then kind of scrub it in. And as it moves into this area, it tends to get a little bit more brown. So I'm just kind of dipping my brush in the asphaltum very gingerly. So I pick up a little bit of it, and there's, but not enough of a change. Thought I'd have more of a change. Let's try it one more time. A little bit more. So it's a little more asphalt and a little bit more umber and ochre. You see, I'm not brushing it down real hard. Primarily because I know I have to paint that shadow back on top. So if I get this too thick or too wet, it's going to cause me problems later. Now, I know a lot of people would draw all those shadows in and paint around them neatly. My suggestion with regard to that is don't. Just simply don't. Trust yourself to put those shadows in. Okay, a little bit of that warmth came through. I can get a little bit of light on that roof, and I'm going to make that a little lighter because it looks like the light is coming from that direction. So I actually just took white and Naples and added it to the color I was just painting with. And I'm going to do this right here. And we're just going to leave that alone. Okay. I haven't painted all the way to the edge because there is truthfully no light happening there, but I can bring some of that light back up in here if I want to at this point. I mean, purposely, I don't like any one area to be too flat of a color. It looks, for the way that I paint, it tends to look too graphic. Now, if you're the kind of artist that paints in a very graphic style, you may want that. And by all means, go for it. But if you're not the kind of artist that might paint in that kind of a graphic style, don't sweat it. Don't deal with it. All right. So let's go with kind of some of the darks in here. All right. The dark of the roof. So I'm going to use the same brush. And what I do is I take it and I squeeze some of that pigment out. So it's still got a little residue of that pigment in there. But I kind of brush it out. Now I'm going to grab the asphaltum and the blue. And for those of you that haven't watched a lot, asphaltum is basically just a little basically darker version of a burnt umber and a little warmer. So very often I'll use a burnt umber instead. All right, that's a little darker than I don't want to go quite that dark that fast. I want to go close to it. So I added white, a little bit more umber. Let's try it one more time. Okay, that feels a little better. And we're going to bring it right down here. Just about right. And then over into where this dark is, because we want to hit the big, simple, dark masses. Right there. And then there's a lighter area here, and then there's a window. I didn't know it was that until I just looked at it now. This other dark area back behind the foliage is looks to be a window. This stays pretty dark up in here. Not all the way to the corner. We just kind of fuzz it so we end up with an edge that doesn't feel too harsh. Nice, simple way of beginning. As long as I've got that color, I can add a little bit of umber to it, or asphaltum, and I can go in. I'm going to go a little lighter. So I'm adding a touch of white to it as I add, and I'm going to go right in on this edge of this roof. Right there. And kind of hit where I see the shadow. Now, purposely, I don't want it quite as dark as this. So I added just a little bit more white to it.
Lynn wants to know which blue you're using.
Which what?
Blue.
The blue I always use is ultramarine. I will always tell you if I lay out another blue. But in this, I don't see the need for any additional blue. See, I have what I call a workhorse palette, which is a palette that I tend to use over and over and over again. That's my main palette. But then I have augments that I will use depending on what I'm painting. I don't always lay out yellow. Today I did, and by yellow, a cad yellow hue, because I know I'm going to need it in certain areas. So, but I don't always lay that yellow out. But I saw no need to lay any sort of a cerulean or a phthalo or a Prussian out. none whatsoever. So there's basically the roof. I'll probably fuss around with it later because I know it's not exactly right. So we're going to go up to the peak, and then we're going to come down on the side. I don't want to, I'm going to destroy part of this. So as I paint the shadows in on the larger roof later. So whether I'm perfect or not at this point almost doesn't matter, because as I refer to sometimes these lines or these things as holding places. But again, the palettes that I always use are based upon what I see in front of me. I generally always, I mean, my always palette is titanium white. Not always, but I would say 90% of the time, Naples yellow or Naples yellow light. 100% of the time, I lay out ochre. Ochre is one of those colors that I call my go-to color. I go to it a lot. Cat orange hue, 80 to 90% of the time. I didn't used to. It's a color I've kind of became a little bit more enamored with lately. Alizarin crimson, always. In this case, I've got quinacridine, which is permanent alizarin, which has a little bit more of a magenta, and I can get a more brilliant fuchsia or magenta color out of it. And that's why I laid that color out. I always have ultramarine blue on my palette. Always. That's 100% of the time. Sap green, I have, I would say 90% of the time, if not 100. Burnt umber or asphaltum, one of the two, always. Always. It's my dark time. Occasionally, and I have it today, burnt sienna, but I don't always lay it out. And that's it. Today I've added a little of a cad yellow hue and a little bit of a cad yellow deep. And I'm not sure I'm going to need the deep, but I laid it out. All right. So we have these now. Now we're going to move into some of the other foliage, the dark part of the foliage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add sap green and a little bit more asphaltum to the color I was just using. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to look and say here, and we're going to move it right up into the dark of the door. And even though it's not quite that color, I want the value there. And hopefully it's right. Then we've got, again, a little bit of that sap green in there. And we want to kind of lay some of these. We want to get them in now so later we can manipulate them. If you don't have anything to manipulate, then you're fighting against empty space. In this case, there's something already there. And so I'm not fighting against empty space. I'm adding more into what I've already indicated. So this is the green and asphaltum. It felt a little too greeny, so I threw a little bit more asphaltum. I might throw a little alizarin now because it's feeling warmer somehow down in this region. I have no idea why. I'm just looking at my reference and seeing it. It's a little bit more of a green as it moves up into the foliage. Up here, a lot of darks. There's a little bit of light happening to it, but there's so little light, it's ridiculous to just save it. Just paint over it. Trust yourself. As long as you're not painting thick, you're not going to fight. And I think it's very important for all painters to learn how to put paint on wet paint. Because a lot of people want to paint tile paint. They want to paint little areas up to areas instead of painting them through. Sometimes I don't even draw. I just start massing in shapes. And you might ask why. So let me answer that. I'm really not sure, to be truthful. I think part of it is the way I feel and the way I see the piece coming together. And I think the more you all paint, the more this is going to happen. You're going to almost paint the piece in your mind. I mean, it sounds kind of stupid now that I say it out loud, but in essence, what it is you're kind of almost figuring out your process, your method, where you're going first, what you're going to do. I've got it down now over many, many years that I have a good feeling of what I need to do first, second, and third. And I get them mixed up sometimes. You will too. But with experience, through experience, even though you mix them up, you know how to paint your way out of it. Good buddy of mine, Dan Cooper, and I used to be over at our house a lot. We lived in LA, and terrific painter, good illustrator. And right now he's at Disney. But we used to talk about the concept of painting yourself into a corner, getting in trouble, and then painting your way out of it. Most artists don't want to do that. But, and I've heard it said, and I tend to agree with the statement that a lot of times great art, really great art, happens when you're on the edge of losing control and you pull it back. And I understand completely that concept, completely. And you will do more of that will happen if you paint without doing your sketch. The minute you do that sketch, those lines become almost like the gospel. Don't mess with the lines. They're right. You don't know anything. But you know what? They may not be right. And to your benefit, if they're not, then what happens is you help recreate that drawing with mass. Remember, and I've said this many times, and I'll say it over and over and over again, we don't see in line, we see in mass. The drawing of the roof was off. When it's off, fix it. Don't just go, well, I messed up. Bless you. But what you want to do if you see something wrong, fix it before you plow ahead, or know enough that you need to go back and fix it. One of the two. Okay. I'm thinking of what I want to do next. I think what I want to do is I want to lay the shadows in on the grass, since they're a big part of it. All right. So I'm going to take the color I was just using, and I'm going to add white to it. Why? The value of this is lighter than the value of that green. Therefore, this is quite dark. I don't want it to be that dark. So I'm going to add white and a little ultramarine to that color. Color is just using. Why ultramarine? What the sky? Blue, isn't it? So the sky is influencing this area right here. And I want to paint it in kind of clumsily, just because I want to be able to carve back into it when I paint the lights on the grass. Now, one of the mistakes you can make if you have a base tone that's down, that's a little too dark, is you can actually make a mistake and start painting everything a little too dark, because you relate all your colors when you first start painting, you relate to this tone. All right. If you have white, you're probably going to paint too light, because think about it. You've got white down there. Every color you lay down, you're going to relate to white. So that's why I like painting on a tone. I think I need to bring this area over further, but we'll take care of that as we move along. Remember what I said. If you know you need to fix something, either fix it right now or remember it so you can fix it later. So we're just going to kind of indicate some of this dapple area up in here with that little bit of blue and white mixed into the color that I was using. Now, sometimes when I used to paint in acrylics, I would paint the whole lawn in this color and then just kind of chip away at it, because the paint is dry. It's a lot easier. But with oil, if I did that, then I'd be fighting that wet paint all the time. So I generally don't do that. All right, now it's going to also affect that path, and it's going to be pretty similar in its tone. It might be a little warmer, but it's so far back there, you almost can't tell. So I'm just kind of indicating this back over the path. And I definitely, and I can see it, I definitely want it lighter than the foliage. There's very little light happening on that path. I might actually make a little bit more just because there's so little light, almost bothers me. Okay. So we've got a little bit of stuff moving on. Now I can put that similar value, but I probably, I've got to keep it similar value. I'm not going to use this brush. I'm going to go with a little bit of a smaller brush, like a number, this is a 6. But I'm going to take that same kind of color. I'm going to take white and a little ultramarine and mix it into that foliage color. So it's still muted, but we're going to kind of indicate a little bit on the building some of these shadows. And I have changed the shadow. I have not made the shadow as dense as it appears in the actual photograph. Dense meaning dark, opaque. We need to feel that it's a different surface. It's not the same surface. Therefore, and it's the same mistake that I watch students will make when they're painting still life, and they have a white ground plane. And if they work from photography particularly, but I've seen them doing this from life also, is they make the shadows on that ground plane black because they see it. Oh, it's darker. Look at it, it's darker. And they're right. It's not black. It is still white. It just happens to be in shadow. So, just keep that in mind. And you see it on the ground, grass, cement, all the time. When in doubt, paint too much and then cover it later. It's a little lighter. It appears a little lighter. And I'm picking up a little ochre to lighten it and maybe a little white. It's very thin. I'm not working with very thick paint. A little lighter still. I'm going to take a little Naples and let's do it right in here. And there's brickwork in there too. It's going to go over the brickwork. We'll get that in. Of course, if you left the brickwork out and the painting looked good, no one would know. Only you and anyone else who knows the house. It's like painting a model with stripes on their shirt, running out of time. You don't get the stripes in, but the painting itself works beautifully. But you didn't get the stripes in. Doesn't matter. Still looks good. Or you're painting a model that's wearing a gray scarf. And you say, and you love the value. It works beautifully, right? But you say to yourself, God, it needs a snap of color. I want to make that more of a magenta scarf. And you make it magenta. Only person that knows it was gray was you and the model and anyone else that happened to see the painting as you were developing it. Now, oops, I picked up a little too much blue. One of the things that you guys may have heard is the term artistic license. And that means that you change things. And it could be technique. It could be color value, because you think it will make a better painting. And that artistic license thing, I've heard people use it as an excuse. Well, that's what I meant. Well, I know that's what you meant, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't work. So artistic license is one of these things that happens over the course of years as you paint. You develop a sensibility towards changing things. Some people call it a style. Clean and dark. It's a little on the green side. It probably could have been a little bit more lavenderish, but now that I look at it, it is kind of green. And it just fades. It goes about here, and then fades into, okay. And it darkens as it goes down. So I can take a little ultramarine and asphalt and come in and darken it right down in here. Okay. So we're setting it up. Haven't painted on the roof yet. I'm not going to worry about that till the end. I want to get everything set up down here. All right, so the next thing I want to set up is some of the foliage. This I think can go darker down in here as it moves down, because this goes all the way down. I added too much blue into it. I can feel it. So I just bring a little bit more brown and kind of work it back into the rest of the foliage. Okay. A little bit over here. Let's kind of indicate where those bricks are. I have no idea why I want to do it now, but I do. I'm going to take burnt sienna. I'm going to take white and blue. Probably a little too dark. A little bit more burnt sienna, a little bit more white. That might work. Might work. Let's see. And we want to. I'm going to paint all the brickwork in this color, because this is what I was saying, that partly because I think I can come back on top with a few strokes and make the lights work. So we're going to pop that in, then maybe leave it alone right here, but go up above. Every time I touch other paint, I can see right now that burnt sienna is not dark enough. So I've got to darken it. I can darken it with asphalt as we get up here, because it really stands out more. There, it stands out more like that against the shadow. So what I did, the concept of just adding the warm brown to it makes it, still keeps it warm, but it also makes it darker than the shadow of that kind of blue gray I put back in there. Okay, so we've got a little bit of that put in. Let's leave it alone. Let's want to keep moving on through the whole piece. Now, there's a window back in here. It's quite a bit darker. And since I've got some darks on my brush and mixed up, I just mixed up a lighter version, similar to this value, hopefully slightly warmer. And we're going to put the light in, kind of right in there. That's good. Any other place? No, none that I see. So we're going to leave that alone. Make it a little bit. There we go. Over a little further, over a little further. So let's start to move into some of the foliage, and we'll start to lay some of the reds in. I want to get the greens in first. I'm going to go back to my bigger brush because I really want it to be much freer and looser. So we're going to start. I think I'm going to start with kind of the warm. And I mentioned earlier something I wanted to correct. I want this to start here, come down here, then work its way over, then come down. All right. So with that in mind, let's get this back. Let's start with the warm. Ochre and a little bit of cat orange hue. Pretty dry. A little bit more cat orange hue into it. A little bit more. I just don't feel I'm getting that warm. There we go. There. There. Down in here. Over. Probably here. Okay. That's the light. Okay. Now we're going to start in with some of the green foliage. For that, I'm adding a little medium, a little white, a little yellow, sap green, and ochre. The ochre is going to warm it up a little bit. I don't want to go as light as I see it, because I want that to happen on top. So little extra ochre, little extra green in there, and we're just going to kind of pop it in really gingerly. Down in here, back behind any of the color. If I need to, I'll make the color overlap it, which I want to. I don't want to paint next. I don't want to do tile painting or mosaic painting, as you will. I often call it puzzle painting.
Okay.
So we're keeping going. Same color. It's not real thick. If it's real thick now, I'm going to fight it later. Okay. So I want it kind of dry and not real thick. So I went back, mixed up some more of the color, pretty close, maybe a little dull it down with a little more orange. Little darker green as it goes back in here. Little piece of coming right up in here. And I see I know people that paint every little leaf. They see there's 7 leaves, so they want to paint 7 leaves. And if you're painting a super realistic painting, great. If you're painting more of an impressionistic painting, just put a blob in there, you guys. But make the blob a nice shape and let it have a nice character. Went with a darker green now. You guys might notice that. Maybe you don't, but I added brown and green to the same color I was using. And we're just pushing greens back into these areas. Threw a little extra blue into it to darken it a little bit. We're going to bring a little too close to the shadow color. Want a little darker, a little bit more brown. There we go. Have to go darker. I just add brown or blue. Okay. All right. Let's get more green. I want to keep an eye on my time because I want to have time to really develop the so-called refinement stage. Now we're just about 35 minutes in. And it's okay. I'm kind of where I would like to be, I think. Of course, I say that, and then as we get towards the end, I realize, no, I wasn't. I thought I was further along. A lot of little picky stuff. If you spend the time on it, you're not going to have time to complete the look of the piece. So you kind of want to make sure you just indicate what needs to be indicated. And then if you need to, go back and refine it later. If you have the time, if you don't have the time, keep it fresh. A little bit of green and white thrown back into that color. Just to brighten it up a little bit. And I see a little bit of change here and there. So I'm going to grab some medium and some yellow, and we'll get a little pop of a little more light. So we get a little variation in that green. Normally I would do that later. And I'm sure I'll do some later, but I'm going to do some right now. So it's not all the same green. And I see a little bit of that light, brighter up here. Right about there. A little more white, a little more yellow, same color, a little more white, a little more yellow. Okay, right there. A little more green this time. I felt like I'm getting too bright too fast. I don't want to get too bright too fast, and I don't want to get too dark too fast. I want it to begin to take on a look. And my eye, this is something that I've said for years. I like my piece to look like it's finished, but maybe a little too dark. And in doing so, I can punch and really start to pull out things and strengthen, amplify, if you will, areas that need more light, more color, because I've given myself that room. But if I start too light, then I've got to try and find all these midtones to sneak back in there. That's hard. I hate hard. Little pieces of light sneaking every so often, right? One right in there. And if you get them in the wrong spot, doesn't matter. Down in here. Not light enough. Some more ochre, some more Naples. Let's try it again. That's better. More green, so it doesn't ever, all of the lights aren't the same. Sometimes it's getting powerful light, sometimes it's just getting a touch of filtered light. And that's why you don't want to paint the same kind of light happening everywhere. I always like to put it in, not make it as bright as I want it, and then at the end, the areas that tend to have more light on them, go back and hit those. There's a lot of texture back in here. So I want it to almost fall back into the paint. So it's there, but it's not there. Okay, so that it actually feels good enough that I can leave it. I get a little bit of light, a little warmer light. So right about there. Do it again. There, there. And then it filters over. I got to get darker. I can see right now in a couple spots. Dark green and brown together. Just pull them back in. I need to get some more darks up in here. Okay. All right. Now, I kind of set it up. I'm going to start. I got to pop some of the brighter colors. I don't want to go to the brighter pinks. I want to go to the pinks and shadow. So same brush, grabbed quinacridine and white, but I've still got dirty paint in my brush. And we're going to paint flowers in shadow, not dark enough. More quinacridine, a little bit more dirt that I already have mixed up. We'll go back. Oh, that's better. It feels like pink and shadow. That's just about right. Or it feels just about right. You know, I might end up look at it later and go, I should have gone brighter. But right now, my guesstimate is that's what I needed. That's right where I need it to be color-wise and value-wise. And what it gives me a place to put brights, because now I can illuminate those. Or before, I had nothing to illuminate. I would have just put bright spots in there and they would have made no sense. So next area is I'm going to take some more dark. I had a little too much red in that brush. Bring it down in to this. Okay, now let's get that kind of reddish color, that pretty, but I see red in shadow first. So I'm gonna, I guess I'll stay with this brush. I'm gonna clean it a little bit. Oof, boy, did I get paint on my hand. Okay, cleaned it. I'm gonna go in with the cad orange hue and the quinacridine. And we'll go, these are the darker flowers back in shadow. There aren't that many of them, but they're back in here. And if you don't get them in there, then again, what's going to happen is it's just going to look like a bunch of bright spots. And you've got to get some of those flowers are not in bright light. Got some down in here. And you want it so that when you illuminate it, you've got some in shadow, some in light. If I have to put more in shadow, you can add them in. They don't have to be 100% in light. Okay, so now we're going to brighten that up just a little bit. And I'm going to squeeze a little bit more of my cad orange hue out, because what I had out there was been out for a couple of days and it's a little bit tacky. So I'm going to stay with the same brush. Sometimes I would switch to a smaller brush. Not going to pick a lot, just a little bit, but I'm going to add more cad orange hue into that, a little bit of medium because I'm painting on top, and a touch of white because it's a little bit brighter. Maybe let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to add a little quinacridine to that color. That feels better. Okay. Feels a little bright, so I'm adding more quinacridine to it. Now we can come over and illuminate some of those that I did dark. So just tickling it in here wherever I can sneak it in. I kind of want to cover all the empty space because I don't want that other color coming through. If I go too far, I just add some more dark. I will go back and forth quite often from dark to light to light to dark, and just to get it working. Little tidbits that I can see just right in. So it's kind of hit and miss. Get some bright spots. We're gonna leave that alone. I can see it needs more mass in here, but for right now, I've got to move. I don't want to stay on that one area too long. We're going to do the same with kind of the fuchsia, but I got to get the orange out of the brush because the orange is wrong. So I just cleaned that brush, a little terp, and rubbed it down real good. This time I'm taking the quinacridone and white. All right. And I'm gonna, this looks like a pretty good color and a little medium mixed into it. So it'll lay on top. And we're gonna start with a test. Okay, that looks good. Little terp into that color. A little bit more quinacridone because it peels a little pasty. So we're going to start right about in here. Same thing. I want to cover as much as I can, as quickly as I can. I want to be able to come over this again. Okay, that's why you want to don't sit there and paint every little, say, well, there's 7 flowers here. No, just look at the flowers as mass. Say there's a bunch of flowers here. I'll get those in. And a bunch of flowers here. I'll get those. Then if you need to go back and say, I got too many in, you go back and you take some of them out. So I'm remixing that color all the time. So when you see me put my brush down, I'm not only picking up paint, but sometimes I'm changing it. Really subtle changes. And if I see get a little darker, a little duller, I dull it up. But pretty much, for all intents and purposes, I'm staying very close to that first color I laid in there. I got a little heavy-handed in there, a little darker, so I can push it right back into that darker paint. A little darker back in here, push it back into that dark, a little darker over in here. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of fuzzing it into that brown that's there. And that'll keep it in shadow. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely go brighter. So I've set myself up really well. That's a good thing. You don't want to set yourself up really poorly. Quite a bit darker down in here. I just see some falling and I didn't get them in earlier, but I just kind of paint them into that dull, dark color. So we get some, you got to have them in shadow because it's not going to look like there's sunlight hitting them or dappled light unless you get the shadows in there. Makes sense, huh? So we get a little bit of that in there. Go back to the brighter color. And I've given myself a lot of room, so I want to make sure I have time at the end. I'm running a little short of time here, so I got to move a little faster here. So I'm going to map some of those in a little quicker. A lot of times, little things like this take too much time. And the faster you can kind of pop them in there. Thankfully, I think the color that I have behind, if it comes through here and there, is actually going to work. And it isn't always that way. And I didn't plan it that way. I can tell you why I didn't plan it that way. I didn't know I was going to paint this until about an hour before we start. I never do. Occasionally I will have something in mind the day before, but sometimes I sit down the morning I'm going to do this and I go, well, now what am I going to paint today? So I picked out usually I have about 4 or 5 picked out, and sometimes I'll ask Anna, and sometimes this time I just said, no, I'm going to paint this. Some of these hidden back here, little piece sticking out. As I stand back, it feels kind of correct. A little bit more massive in here, a little bit of spottiness up in here.
So you're just going for like the cluster of.
Yeah, clusters. Exactly. So that's as far as I'm going to go right now. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the lawn in, okay? I'm gonna go, I think with this brush, because I don't want it too neat. So I'm gonna take the yellow and the green, and I still have some of this red in the brush, which is, so I don't need to warm it up. Yellow, green, ochre, and white. Maybe some Naples.
So cad yellow hue and sap green.
Excuse me? Yeah.
Cad yellow hue
Yeah.
and sap green.
Let me test it. Pretty good. A little more ochre maybe, but not bad. Okay, so let's carve it in here. Let's get the light happening. And I keep remixing the color. It's one of the things I do, even when I was doing the flowers, I do it. When I do anything, I am constantly, so sometimes it isn't always exactly the same color. So we're gonna come down here. Let's go there. A lot of times at the very end, when I'm all done, I will go back and be a little more careful with some of these. But usually I don't start careful. I start like this, a little bit more trusting. And then I find, and I'm going to grab a secondary brush, just so I have a brush that if I need to get in with smaller spaces, I can do that, such as things like that, and I can just pull the paint that I've been using, move it around. So now we've created a little bit of similarity to what I see up there. And a little bit, I'm going to grab some more yellow into that right here. Big, almost down to here. A little bit back in here. I'm putting more in than I see there too. And I knew even when I painted that I was adding more. Okay, let's go in here. Probably didn't paint enough of that underpainting in. Let's get that over here. I always like to have a brush that I can go back and add shadows with too. So if I need to take this color and add more of that, like here, I can do it. So it's nice when you can work back and forth. Sometimes, and you just need an extra brush. It's not a big undertaking. Just need a spare brush to always have handy. And probably wiped out too much shadow. So what do? Add a little bit of shadow back in. And let's see, the shadow comes here, comes down, breaks up, I get little spots, bigger mass in here. If I need to break it up, I'll break it up a little bit. Down here. I got to stand back every now and then. Okay, I just stood back. I can definitely brighten that. So hopefully I have the time. Because that's exactly the way I would want to paint it. I wouldn't want to paint the full density of it, or intensity of it, I should say, with my first shot. I would definitely want to be able to come back and give it one more layer and really add because some spots are brighter than others. But we got to get into the roof, the building, then go back into the flowers. So a little bit behind where I think it would be beneficial. I think I could be a little bit ahead of where I'm at. So I'm going a little quicker now. Mixing color into color a little bit more. That starts to work. Not as good as I hope, but it starts to, and that's all I can hope for right now. Well, I've got that color on my brush. I can intensify. I'm going to do it with this brush. White, yellow, back into that color. Why? Because I want to hit some of these spots brighter, like there, here. That's, I told you I was going to need to come back onto this at some point. So we're starting to, what you start to do is add illumination. Now, let's illuminate some of those flowers. So we're going to take white with a quinacridone and maybe just a touch of orange. It's a lot of white up right about there. A little medium mixed into that, get a little bit more snap out of it. But the medium's allowing me to do the, and when I say medium, I'm referring to the solvent-free gel, which I lay out because I can lay the paint on and not push it into the paint. And that's how I'm getting a little bit of a snap happening here and there. And as you progress, basically that's what you want. Some whites. They're off whites, basically. Up in there. All right, let's get the building in. Let's take, I'm going to take this number, what is this, about a number 6 filbert, and it's kind of a greenish color, kind of a ochre green. Actually, I'm going to use Naples. Now that I look at it, Naples just with a little of a cool hue into it. It's very white. Very, very white. This right here. Boom. Oh, got to be careful we don't get too much dirt. A little bit more Naples into it. A little bit more medium. I don't want to, what the medium will do, it'll keep me from picking up as much of the other underpaint because it'll allow the paint to sit on top and it won't, I don't have to press as hard. And when the harder you press, the more you push the paint into the paint. And by into the paint, I mean into the paint that you already have on your canvas. So we're gonna hit that little piece of white happening here. Quite a bit over here. More light happening right about there. Just stood back. That, I think I still made that color too dark. So if I have time at the end, I would go back and lighten that shadow a little bit. I'm gonna get, you'll see, hopefully it start to make even more sense when I get the light on the brick. But before I do, I need to get the house, the light on the house. And you can correct some of the sloppier areas that you've done as you begin to put that light in. Big area of light. Gets a little darker and duller, so I don't mind the mixing of the colors as we move down into this region. A little lighter up here, really bright around that. Okay, let's get a little light on the brick for them to pick up a smaller brush. And we want to go cat orange, maybe some Naples, and that may do it. Maybe a little bit of quinacridone to make it a little bit more red. Let me try it. Let's try it right. I'm going to use my little finger and try it right here. Nope, a little bit more red. There we go. Try it one more time. It needed to be brighter. I could feel it with, there we go. First stroke, I could see that I wasn't bright enough. And we carefully. And back in here. Maybe a little bit right there. Okay. And you might be looking at it saying, well, what do you do with the white lines? You know, you just don't have time for that in a painting like this. But I want to get a little darker in the entry. If you remember when I put that in there, I said I didn't know if it was exactly right, but I wanted a dark in there to begin with. Okay, so now we've opened up the entry. I'm going to get a little bit of light up here, go into here, and then we'll start brightening. And I've got about a little over 30 minutes to do that in. So how do I feel about that? I feel rushed, to the truth, but we'll make it work. I may not make it as neat as I would like to. So, and that's, you know, it'll be maybe a little more impressionistic than I had hoped, but I hope it holds together as a unit. And that's one of the things that I do want when it's complete. So if I go too tight in any one area, too refined in any one area, it's not going to work. We need a little light happening right inside the window frame, a little bit right here. It's kind of a dirtier, grayer color, a little bit of light right. Nope, not enough. Right there and right there. Maybe a little bit of it sneaking up here. Okay. In the other window, the only light I really begin to see is a little piece of light right about in here. And I can see a little bit in here. Okay. Anything else I need to clean up? Like, oh, that edge. Didn't want that. Had way too much terp. That's what happens. You get too much terp in your brush, and you get that. You get the drips. Now, if you're kind of artist, like a lot of artists love the drips, I paint to avoid the drips. But I know artists that actually work to use the drips, which is perfectly all right. It's a style, it's a technique, it's whatever you want to call it. All right, let's get a little bit of shadows in on the roof. Now, want to keep it cool. It's cool light, but I don't want it too blue because it's a brown roof. So we're going to mix blue and brown together and white. And I'm going to start from this tree, the way it comes up and comes right here. That's a pretty good color. It's not a bad choice. And we get another one right here. A little more, too much blue into that, but by the time I'm done, hopefully you're not going to notice the differences. We're going to get some dappled light right down here. Has a little bit of a lavender quality too. Whoops, way too much blue. Went way too dark with it. There, bringing it back. Somewhere in this range. Still too dark. Shadow should actually be darker than the sky. I probably don't have it dark enough, but I've got to make it busy enough so that it feels correct by the time I'm complete here. Come in right in here. I'm going to go a little quicker, a little bit more abrupt with this than I would like to be. Another coming from right about here. Going up here, over. Then we got a nice dark. That went a little too blue. So I brought some burnt sienna back in there. It works a little bit better. Let's get all up in here. And then I'm going to chop back in with the roof color in a little bit. But I've got to get these darks set up. or the shadows, I should say. They were, I don't know, calling them darks might be a little bit of a misnomer. Let me stand back for a second. Value-wise, it's working. I don't like the brush work, but it's only wrong if you leave it. Remember that. So, which means I gotta change it.
It looks like you're using all parts of the brush though.
I am. That's a good point. I'm pressing sometimes, other times I'm just using the tip. That's given me the variation of the character of the kind of leaves that I see. Okay. Once I get this up to a point, which I'm just about at, I really don't have time to go really a lot further with it. But what I would do at this point is clean that brush. Actually, I would keep the brush. I'm not going to clean it. I'm going to take the light part of that roof, and I'm going to take another brush similar in size, if I can find one. That's pretty good. And I'm going to paint in the light on the roof using medium and that color, if that's right. No, it needs more white. But I got to make sure I have a lot of medium because I'm cutting in. So I'm breaking into it here and there. And that's what creates the feeling of dapple. What creates the feeling of dapple is not painting one on top of another. It's painting multiples. It's painting lights on darks, darks on lights, and chipping back and forth until the effect is what you hope it's going to be. This is where sometimes it's really nice to let your paint be a little thicker and where you can use your medium a little bit more, particularly when you're painting quickly. When you're painting quickly, you really don't have a choice but to do that. And then remember, I saved that brush, so if I need to, I can go back and add a little bit of a shadow. So hopefully, ideally, the viewer cannot tell whether you painted the light on the dark or the dark on the light. Because, and truthfully, you can't. You've painted both. And it just depends upon how far you want to carry this. Now, we're only going to be able to carry it so far because of time. But hopefully you get the idea that you can just chip away. You don't want to dot it. Got to be very careful. I've seen students over dot, and I've done it myself. So you want to be careful. You want to paint mass, then paint an edge, and then chip away on the inside if you have to. Little pieces of your brush. There are areas that you want to be controlled and areas you want to be a little freer in. Let me step back. Say that you can see the difference between this, and this isn't anywhere near as far as it should be, and this, which is not as refined. And as we move over, it gets a little more ochre, so add a little more ochre to the color, but we're going to go up in here. And at this point, I'm probably not going to be able to hit every spot. I'm just going to hopefully get enough of it to make it look believable. And for example, I'd mentioned sometimes I'll go back in for another, this is probably what I'll do at the end, go back in and chew up a little bit of that dapple in there so that I get a little bit better effect. And we want to separate the two roofs. So I'll come in here, add a little bit more. And then on the roof below, I will go a little bit more white because I see it that way. A lot of medium, a little more white in the same color. And what we're going to do is just be a little bit more careful. a little bit there. And I'm just gonna, so I pick up the peak of this roof. We'll put the light back behind. Hate to use this small of a brush for too much because it really, it overpicks. That's why I always try and stay with a little bit of a larger brush. And use the tip of the brush as opposed to the whole body of the brush all the time. A lot of little dappled in here. I got to keep my eye on the time. Okay, I got about 20 minutes because I want to go back down below. We got to get into this area right in here. So I'm going to move into that like right now because otherwise I'm not going to get it. Pick up the side of this tree. A little bit in here, a little bit down here, a little bit in here, and coming across the railing. Now that I see it comes, not only hits here, but then it hits down in here and in here and right about there. Okay. That's about as far as I'm going to go on this. I'm just not going to have the time. I do want to get this foliage in here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my large brush. I'm going to go back and add green to the color I was using earlier and a lot of medium and a lot of ochre. And we'll start here, see where I'm at. Too much ochre, more green. Start again. More green. Down here, down here. The darker greens. Now, some of those darker greens get warmer. So what I did is I just took a little turp and a little burnt sienna. Not enough. We take some brown to it. Oh, probably went too dark, but no, not enough. Want to get some of these darker leaves in underneath that are going to sit below the brighter leaves. They're in there. And then we'll get
Kathy was wanting to know what size this is. I don't know if she's talking
18 by 24.
Okay.
Is that, oh, the size of the painting?
Or maybe the brush. I'm not sure.
Oh, it's just that's a 1 inch basically gesso brush. And I use that a lot when I do stuff like this, even when I paint slow in my studio. This has nothing to do with speed. This brush gives me a better character than almost any other brush that I have found. So we need to illuminate that now. So I have to give myself room to illuminate this, this, and this, and this. Okay. So first, let's illuminate that. So let's take some maples and some yellow into the same color I was using. And maybe a little bit of green, a lot of medium. And let's test. We're only going to get probably 1 or 2 layers in, which I would love to get about 6. And you vary. Remember what I told you? Every time I simply take my brush down, I'm varying the color. I'm picking up either a warm, a cool, darker, lighter, as I see it. And I'm reacting to what I see, the area. So if I'm looking at that area, I see not quite as bright as that area. And so thus I'm mixing up those kind of colors. Brighter, yellow, Naples, same color. A little more green. And if it starts where I don't like it, I'm going to smear it. Big areas first, small areas after. If I have time, I'll go back and get smaller areas. I don't know if I'm going to have time. And that's the perils of plein air work, is time. And as I've mentioned many, many times, this is more or less how I would paint if I were on location painting because of the time frame. That looks okay. It's a little spotty. It's a little wallpapery, but it's not bad. But while I've got that nice bright, let's look in here. And where else do I see some nice bright greens? Right back in here, right in here, really nice bright green. Definitely on the grass, but that's what I'm going to deal with right at the very end, because if I don't have time, I'll just get a little bit of it in. If I have time, I'll get a lot of it in. Little spots of light back in here. Oh, that's a nice touch of light, right? I like that stroke. I just wanted to shove that brush down. I got a nice movement of paint. A little more green, a little bright in here. Looks like it's starting to shape up. Now, while I've got that same green, I'm going to dirty it up a little bit, just so I get a little bit of this up in here. Okay. By dirty it up, I just mean go back to some of those dirtier green colors, browns I was using in the greens, just so we get a feeling of that, because I did leave it vacant. I don't want to spend much more than a minute or two up in this region. On a painting such as this, I might want to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes on a studio painting, but in a plein air, no. It's also something I know I could go back into if I wanted to in the studio without having to have that exact image there. And that's all I'm going to do. So now we're going to go back, and I think I'm going to pick up a knife if I can. We've got about 15 minutes, it looks to me like. So I'm going to grab this knife, and we're going to start to illuminate what is kind of the star of this, and that's the foliage. First, let's start with this. So what I go is I've got my, and I'll show you when I say I got paint, that's what I mean by I got paint. Okay. And I'm going to take a little Naples to that, or white, but in this case, Naples. Either one will work. And so it doesn't stay too much of an orange, I'm throwing a little of the quinacridine into it, but it should be lighter. And then I'm going to take some medium right about there and mix that right into the paint. And here's what I'm hoping. It pops. And if I'm right on my value, it will pop. I just want to lay it on top. Whoops. Just lay it on top. Don't push it back into the paint. Now I could do that with a brush.
It looks way better.
Huh?
It looks more fun with a knife.
It looks more fun with a knife, Anna said. You know, it kind of is. It's like, and I've never frosted a cake.
It looks like
That's what it's like. It's kind of like adding a little frosting. So think of this as illuminating with frosting. And if you go too far with it, you can scrape it. By God, no, you don't have to keep it. You don't like it, get rid of it. Remember, it's only wrong if you leave it. And you may complete painting sometimes and go, now why did I leave that? And you know what you do then? You pick up a brush and wipe it out. Or get rid of it. If it bugs you enough, change it. If it doesn't bug you enough, you don't need to change it. So I picked up a little bit of more of a red color here. Kind of the first base color I was using. A little bit down here. Sometimes it's just, don't try and hit flowers, hit masses. Okay. Feels pretty good. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. That didn't take too long. So what am I doing? Picking up white, putting it on my palette, picking up quinacridine. Voila. Mixing it together, bringing a little medium in on top of it, almost with the same amount. So it's pretty loose. Checking my value. I think I'm okay. I think I need, whoops. I bumped too much? No. I got fat arms, man. Gonna put a little bit more medium on it. I don't think I had enough. There we go. Sometimes I just squeeze the medium right on top. Okay, let's see what this looks like when we start to pop it. Nope, I want to go brighter. Just means a little more white is all. By brighter, I meant lighter. So it popped more. Mix it up pretty good. Then let's go back, and feels a little better to me.
Whoa.
Yeah, you saw it was dripping.
Yeah,
When I say pick it up, I mean, and when I paint fast, that's what I do.
glob of paint.
The quicker I paint, generally the faster, particularly at this stage, the thicker I get.
Yeah, that's good.
And if it, bugs you, then get rid of that lip. Sometimes you dab, sometimes you take the whole and just plow it down. So don't just take and I've seen people too much with a palette and go pick, 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 pick. Yeah, you want to do a little bit of that. Just like with brush. With a brush, you don't want all your brush strokes to be the same. With a palette knife, you don't want the lay-in of the paint to be the same. You want some to be big and bold, and you want some to be little ticked at. So I got to stand back for one moment. So it is illuminating it pretty good. As I stand back, the values are beginning to work. Not crazy about that yet. And the grass is too light. I mean, it's not light enough. We need more snap there. I won't do that with a knife. I think I'll do that with a brush. Now, every flower is not lit the same. Some are darker because the way light's hitting it, some are lighter. So just kind of, as you see it, apply your paint. If it's lighter, right now, that's all we're working on. We kind of hopefully hit most of the darker, but at the very end, if I feel like, boy, I just got to throw some more darks in there, I will go back and violate some of the strokes that I'm putting in now and make a darker tone. Little pieces of flowers catch light. That's where you just want just that little snap of light. Like I see a big mass in here, so really big power. Little piece right in here. Little pieces right about here. Little pieces of light. Crap, I sound like Bob Ross. Little pieces of light. That's what you're painting. Or as Sherry McGraw says, I'm going to lay a piece of paint down. I love that line. Because that's what we're doing, particularly here. When you're doing it this way, you literally are laying a piece of paint down. You're not laying just, you're not pushing paint into paint. You're laying paint. You're literally laying paint down, which is fine. Have fun with it, man. When you're done, and I don't know whether I've ever said this to on any of these Friday things, but I really believe this. When you're done and someone looks at it, it should look, I believe, like the artist enjoyed what the hell they're doing. That it shouldn't look like the artist was struggling. Now, do the layman understand? I mean, I don't know who understands that and who doesn't. I definitely see it. I can look at a piece, I can look at my own work and know when I was struggling to get something to work and when it just was going. All right, now there's a little bit of light on that. I just noticed on the edge of that roof. And I think because I've got this in my hand, it's the only reason I'm using it. Okay, a little bit of light on the area down below. Okay, let's get what do we got, about 10 minutes? Okay, I'm gonna get the grass in. I'm gonna go back into this a little bit, maybe lighten some of that. I still would love to clean that up. I know I just don't have the time, but I sure would like to.
Lynn was asking, now I see violet in the roof.
You do? Good.
That's what Lynn was.
The more colors the more you study it, and the longer you have painted, the more you will be able to all of a sudden spot subtle color differences. Now, sometimes that can mess you up. I do know a couple artists, I won't mention them by name, who sees too much color and they start playing with the color too much. And where it should be basically simplified. And you got to be careful of that. I always, my whole thing is when it starts looking overdone, go back and simplify. Go back to where it looked good. Because usually at some stage of almost any painting, it looks pretty darn nice. And not that you want it to be perfect from the onset, because it can't be. It's just the way it is. So I'm going to go back to the grass, yellow, a lot of yellow, a lot of medium, because I'm painting right back on top of paint, and I'm going to double check this. Nope, I want to go lighter still, white. And since I've used up most of my yellow, I'm going to squeeze some more out. There we go. There you go. More of a chartreuse. And it's much brighter. See, what happens is as it filters through, as the light filters through leaves on a tree, sometimes you're still getting light, but because it's been diminished because of the amount of leaves that it has to go through. If it doesn't have to go through any of it, any of the foliage up above, sometimes it'll be quite bright. And that's why you'll get areas that will be really bright and areas that will be a little, they're still get illuminated, but they're nowhere near as bright. And that's just, what it is? It comes down to, don't get too satisfied too early on your paintings. I used to all of a sudden say, oh, it's great, it's working. And then I thought I was close to done. But usually when I think and I've learned this over the years, and it's something I pass on to everybody that I see painting, when you think you're done, you're probably half done. Because there can be that much more that you can begin to develop. It means it's working. You've done a good, pat yourself on the back. You've done a good job. But you could take it so much, make it so much better. And that's kind of what we all want, I would assume, is for our paintings not just to look good, but really to look terrific. And about the only way you're going to do that is to really allow it to develop. Now, on the ground plane, back in the dirt, in this area, this light extends into that dirt. Therefore, that first color I put in didn't feel light enough. So you want that continuity of light, meaning the light comes from here into the dirt, from here into the dirt. So we get the feeling that light, like right here, we got to have that light move in from here in on that soil, on the soil. And it'll feel more natural. Let's put it that way. It feels like it's more natural. Now I can go back in here. I can actually go back on that roof a little bit and just chip away a little bit more, because I'll lose sleep over this, you guys, if I don't if you're like me. If it isn't working, I want it to at least work good enough so that you guys understand where it should be headed. That feels like a really dense mass, and I don't see that. So what I want to do is chop that up. This for me as a painter, this is the part that kind of is boring. It's just because you have to put the time in, you've got to put the care in. But very often what I find that I do is I'll work on this area, and then I'll go back and work on another, and then go back and work on this area again, and then go back and work on another area. And it keeps me from getting too bored in that one process. of just adding the dappled light. Now, if I wanted to, I could take, I keep saying if I wanted to, I want to. I want to take and add a few little lights on the greenery, but I'm going to add them with a knife. And they come almost that light. So I can almost go back to that color. I'm going to take just a little bit of green into that color and use my knife. And we're going to add some lights on some leaves. That feels better. It feels like it's a little more illuminated here and there. Maybe not as much as I want. I noticed up on that background tree that there's some light happening on the branches right about there. Let's do it. Let's see if I can get it in there before we're out of time here. How are we doing time wise? Just about out. So I could definitely go into this a lot more. I can see I went a little dense in here, and it wouldn't hurt to go back in and add a few little subtle darks here and there. And that's when you I call it revisiting. I don't know what other artists refer to it, but I really refer to it, and you want to constantly revisit an area because you might see it a little bit differently. And in seeing it a little bit differently, you can enhance it somewhat if it needs it. At the same time, you might see it and go, geez, I went too far with that. Now, I didn't put enough back in here, but this is not an area of tremendous importance. So we really don't have to have a lot. Now, there is a little bit of light on the pathway, which tends to be a little bit cooler, but real light in value, cooler and light. So we're going to put a little piece of light here, right about here, back there. Don't like picking too much with a little brush, but it's making it start to work. So I can see a lot of little nuanced stuff that I would fuss with in some of these shadows, some of these lights. And here. This looks okay. I can see some darks I should add. We'll probably do that when after I take a break, get something to eat. I don't know about you guys. I'm getting hungry. Are you guys eating? How many of you guys eat while you watch? Because I envy you. But you know what? I've said before, I'll say it again. I want to thank everybody that watches. I always thank Anna. I always thank Scott, because without them, this thing wouldn't be running this smoothly. It would be me trying to make sure the camera was working and questions were being answered, and video was being saved and uploaded later. But as valuable as they are, I appreciate the fact that actually you guys not only sign in and watch this thing, but then you comment, and you comment after the fact. And that's really makes me feel like I should keep doing it for a while, because I do it for me because I enjoy doing this, but I also enjoy the fact that other people get something out of it. And that makes me feel like a lot of this is worthwhile. So I really should also thank the Academy that jumped in on this thing. Anna and I started it all by ourselves, and Academy of Art University saw what was going on and said, geez, we'd like to get in. And so they offered their video help. Guys like Scott come in, and we not only do this, but then Scott goes in and posts this on YouTube, puts it on. And so you guys can see it. And even I can go back and look at it and say, whoa, I look really fat in that. But I'm really glad that they were able to jump in and add a helping hand, because it really does make it a little bit nicer than just me jabbering into space. So thanks a lot, you guys. Hopefully you get the idea of this nice dappled light type painting. Anyway, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Anna. Thank you all.